Something that we all love to see are indie games going viral. Seeing a game made by a small studio having a huge success and doing really well is absolutely amazing to see. And recently there's a new indie game that's gone viral. The game is called Librarian Tidy Up the Arcane Library. It is a cozy casual game where this mischievous spirit has gone through this entire magical library and completely unorganised and messed up and scrambled all the books. Now all the books are strewn all over the place, and it's up to you, the player, to put everything back in its rightful place. When I first heard about this game and saw about it, I was going to buy it, especially for such a low price. And I was checking it all out, and I scrolled down on the Steam page, and I saw this. This indie game has a generative AI disclosure, meaning that they have utilised generative AI in the development of the game. And this is something that it seems a lot of people aren't actually aware of. You know, there's a lot of people playing the game, including artists or art-adjacent people, who haven't actually noticed the generative AI usage in this game. However, in saying that, the disclosure shows a minimal usage of generative AI, and more so using it as a tool as they claim. But are they being truthful, or are they actually hiding how much they have used? Today we're going to have a look at this, and just have a discussion about the AI usage in this game, and in general, what is sort of the limit or line for using generative AI within games or other creative spaces. Let's get into it. Librarian Tidy Up the Arcane Library was developed by a small indie studio called Art Rising, which only has 2 developers based out of Japan. Now, judging by the name of the studio, you would have thought they'd be very art-oriented, and so when I saw an AI disclosure, I was quite shocked. The AI-generated content disclosure states, the 4 assets in this work, 1 UI component and 3 landscape paintings used as wall decorations, frames not included, were produced using additional AI for refinement. None of them were created by AI from the ground up. Now what this implies is that the paintings themselves were human-made, they were not generated by AI, but they were instead fed into a generative AI model in order to, in their words, refine them. Now, this isn't actually as bad as just outright generating the images yourself, but however, there is still a problem with this. Firstly, we don't know if the images they put into generative AI models were actually their own. They have shown no proof for or against if these paintings were created by them, or if they are instead paintings they took off of Google or something, meaning they would be someone else's work. So we have no idea if what they put into these generative AI models were their own work or someone else's. If it was their own work, yeah, it's still not great, but you know, at least it's their own work, they're doing it. You know, they're obviously okay with doing that. But if it's someone else's work, that's where it becomes a problem because that artist did not consent to their work being put through an AI model. I got my good friend to have a look in the game for me and take screenshots of these paintings. First of all, there are more than 3 of them. And second of all, yeah, I can kind of tell AI was used on them. A lot of them just have this slight distorted look, which is often an indicator of AI. You know, where shapes just kind of blended into each other and aren't really well defined. And there's also the fact that at least 3 of these paintings have that sort of yellow filter over them. And it's well known that AI has this sort of habit of putting a yellow filter over its generated content, which would tell me that these 3 are the ones that went through AI refinement. Now, one thing that I did to try find this out is I reversed Google image search each painting I had a screenshot of, and yeah, none of them actually came up with an exact match. There were similar things, but not really exactly the paintings that we're seeing. One of them, Google did come up with a real painting called Sunset Sky from 1872 by the American artist John Frederick Kensett. However, putting the 2 pages side by side, I don't think they're the same. They are fairly different, so yeah, I was unable to find any exact matches to these paintings in order to clarify if they are their own work or not. Now, to try clarify this, I did actually contact the studio myself. I asked them to clarify if the paintings that were put through the AI models were their own or not, if they made them. However, unfortunately, as of recording this video, I never got a reply back. The other problem with this using AI for refinement is that every single generative AI model was trained off of essentially stolen artwork. For these models to learn and to basically be able to generate the images they do, they had to look at and feed from other artwork made by human artists, and then essentially take that and try replicate it. And this has been without the artist's consent. So we have this AI model that has been trained to look at human artist artwork and to replicate that and essentially steal it in a way. That AI has now taken that artwork, logged it in its brain, and is using that to replicate and make its own images, built from that original artwork. Nothing it can make is original. Absolutely nothing generative AI can make is original. It is always based off something else, and that something else is very often artwork taken from other artists without their consent. And that is one of the bigger problems with generative AI usage, even in this small sense of just using it for refinement. And of course, the other problem, which is a more broad problem, is that these generative AI models use so much energy, and you have these giant data centers that are just chucking out so much pollution. According to this study from the University of Oxford, it is estimated that data centers account for around 1.5% of global electricity consumption. And that may not sound like much, but if you think about the entirety of the world and how much electricity is used, 1.5% is actually a decent chunk of that. And of course, these carbon emissions from these big data centers can be harmful to the environment. And not even just air pollution can harm the environment. These giant data centers are being built on land where obviously wildlife is probably living, and therefore wildlife habitats are being destroyed, as well as possibly trees being felled, the loss of vegetation and plant life. All of these things that can really aid and benefit our planet are being destroyed in favour of these giant data centers. Currently, the Nashville Zoo is having to protest against a massive data center being built next to them, which could put their animals in danger. The Nashville Zoo has some of the most fragile and rare collections of animals in the country, and they are particularly worried about noise from the data center affecting the breeding of clouded leopards, a very vulnerable species the zoo is working to conserve. So we can see that the impacts of these data centers are just really not good. And all in all, any usage of a generative AI model means you're supporting that model and either turning a blind eye to, or willfully ignoring, or perhaps just not knowing the issues that come along with those models. When looking at the reviews for this game, you see a lot of people are not happy about the generative AI usage. One user states, "I did not notice the AI disclosure message before buying this game, otherwise I would not have bought it. I've issued a refund now after I noticed some glaring signs of AI in the game itself." And another user states, "I would have rated this game much higher if not for the use of AI. Honestly, I really enjoyed the gameplay, but the clear use of AI spoiled the whole experience. It's not needed and could easily be replaced with actual human work." Now, the reason I bring up these reviews is actually the replies to them. On one of these reviews, there is a reply from a user that states, "What is your issue with AI? It's everywhere. If you search the weather, AI is involved. If you view YouTube, your feed is curated using AI. Use Instagram, it's curated by AI. You cannot escape AI, brother." Another user states, "Well, AI is used in life-saving treatments and surgery, so let's see you reject that if the time comes." And there are a lot of other replies along these sort of lines. Now, this is actually because of a bit of a miscommunication, because the people in the reviews that are complaining about AI aren't specifying generative AI. Because yes, there is actually a difference. All generative AI is AI, but not all AI is generative AI. And generative AI is the one that's the problem. You see, the people mentioning it being used in life-saving treatments and surgery, or being used in things like the weather or algorithms, they're not wrong. That is an AI doing that, it's AI tools. But the difference is, these AIs aren't generative. They are not creating new content. They are instead analysing what's already there and giving a result based on that. That kind of AI has been around for absolutely years. It does not have the drawbacks that generative AI has. And these are the kind of tools that are good for us to have. However, what people are complaining about in this game is generative AI and generated content. Generative AI, rather than analysing and putting out a result based on that, instead creates entirely new content based on what it has previously learned. So all these people pushing back, trying to say, well, AI is using this and that and this, and you don't complain about that, seemingly don't realise that what we are complaining about is the generative AI, not AI as a whole. AI as a whole is not bad, but generative AI is, due to the fact that it's built off stolen content and the environmental impact it can have. Looking further at the AI-generated content disclosure, we see that they also state, AI helped with grammatical corrections for in-game text, which were then carefully reviewed and adjusted by hand. Now, I do understand them doing this, because they do seem to be Japanese, and therefore I can understand it may have been difficult for them to make a game in English and any other language, and so using AI as a tool there to help them with that isn't that bad really. Again, it would come down to whether that model was a generative AI model or not. but considering they are disclosing it here, it very likely was a generative AI model, which gives credence to all the previous issues we discussed. And you may say, yeah, but it's not using stolen artwork if it's for writing. Well, no, but it has stolen writing from people to do that. AI-generated novels are now a thing, unfortunately, and obviously to do that is the same story with artwork, that the AI had to be trained off of pre-existing novels that are written by real human authors, again stealing their content and just regurgitating it in a different format. So again, that becomes the issue with using it for their in-game text. And even then, apparently, the grammar still isn't great, and some of the book titles are interesting. But again, I'm not going to be too harsh on them for this because it's not their native language. It seems they ran it through AI, trusted the AI to be correct, couldn't fact check that themselves because they don't know the language so well, and yeah, unfortunately these mistakes made it into the game. Quite frankly, I think the use of generative AI to do this was a bit unnecessary. There are other ways that you can translate a game and fact check grammar and stuff without having to use a generative AI model to do so. So I do think there is a better way they could have done that, which would also be a way that would produce way better results. For example, you could use a service like Grammarly. Not sponsored, by the way, it's just the one that came to mind for me. Furthermore, with so many books in the game, that being over 3,000, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they did ask something like ChatGPT to maybe generate some book titles for them. Hey, Editing Drago here. They have actually stated on their Twitter that they created all the book assets themselves, including all the titles. So according to the devs, they did not use an AI in order to come up with the book titles, only to fix any grammar. Now, there is a concern that a lot of people have with this disclosure. On the surface, it doesn't seem that bad. It seems like their usage of generative AI was very minimal, they used it as a tool, and they didn't generate anything from the ground up. However, reviewers who have played the game do think otherwise. This user states, I am fairly certain that the devs are lying in their AI disclosure. They state AI helped with the grammatical corrections for in-game text, which are then carefully reviewed and adjusted by hand. However, a lot of the book covers either have mistakes in them or just straight up missing words, which means they either didn't review the books by hand or didn't care about correcting the mistakes. Another user states, first up, I absolutely do not believe the disclosure of Gen AI used in this game. I've spent hours picking up books and reading titles, and I do not believe for a second that all the covers and titles were crafted by people. This on its own wouldn't be a huge problem for me, except that the disclosure is blatantly lying. It seems a lot of people think that Arts Rising haven't been entirely truthful in their AI disclosure. Now, of course, it's hard to say whether this is the case one way or another, especially since the developers haven't really clarified anything, they haven't said anything about it. But my concern is that there has been more generative AI usage than what they are saying, and there is a reason why I think that. Now, they are stating that only 4 assets in the game use generative AI. That being 3 landscape paintings and 1 UI component. Now the UI component I'm pretty sure are like the little flourished borders around the icons down here, but when it comes to the paintings, as I said before, there are more than 3 landscape paintings in the game, and yet we're meant to believe they only use AI refinement on 3 of them, and not the others. Maybe they just felt these paintings weren't good enough in their eyes and they wanted to try refine them, but AI isn't going to be able to do that for you. As I said previously, you can tell that these were run through AI, and not in a good way. You can see the issues they have that AI created. And once again, if these aren't their own paintings, then they've essentially said, we don't think this person's work is good enough, we're going to make it better with AI, which is a big no-no. Though again, I will clarify, that's just speculation, we have no idea if this is their own work or not. Hopefully the paintings are their own work, and they haven't taken someone else's work without their consent. But yeah, that is still a potential issue. And not to mention, just how many books there are in this game. Hey, Editing Drago again. I was going to spend a whole section here talking about how the books might be more AI generated than what they're disclosing, but again, we have seen that Twitter post now where they do say that they made them all by hand, that they show the files, and I'm pretty sure they're not lying here, so yeah. But it could have possibly been taken further that some of the book textures, such as their front covers, are also AI generated, in which case that has not been fully disclosed in the disclaimer. But again, that is just speculation, and it's hard to say this for certain without communication from the developers, which again I tried to get, but I got no reply as of this recording. If we go to the developer's Instagram page, we do see a post of a progress of a model they've made. I'm not sure if this model is in the game or not as a book, but it does seem they do know how to make their own models and textures, which is a reassuring sign that they have made these books from scratch. But again, some things with this disclosure just don't line up. People that have played the game are saying that the AI use is very obvious, and if it really was only used as minimally as they say it is, then it shouldn't be that obvious. So there is a lot of discussion on whether the AI generated content disclosure is fully truthful or not. The disclosure ends with this statement: "We only consider AI to be a supportive tool. Every detail is meticulously crafted with human intent, as our creative process is firmly anchored in manual craftsmanship." And you know what? I'm inclined to believe them there. From the very little communication we've had with these developers, they do seem very genuine in their love for art. I mean, just look at this cute little sketch they made of the supposed little spirit that messed up the library in the first place. I'm pretty sure this is not an AI generated image, it's something they drew themselves, and it's such a cute little creative design that it does show their love for art. However, I do struggle to see how they can say this, and then in the same place, admit that they use generative AI, which is very anti-art. It's also hard to know if they did make every asset in this game. As my friend pointed out, the assets do seem copy and pasted, which is visible because there are texture bugs that repeat throughout the library, indicating the copy and paste. And there's two possibilities here. That's either they made their own models and then just copy and pasted them to save time, or they took assets from a model store or something and inserted those into their game, which has no problem with that at all. But if they did take assets from elsewhere and put them into their game, they can't confidently make this statement that every detail is meticulously crafted with human intent. They cannot make that statement if they did not make everything themselves. But again, there is no evidence for or against this. Either these are their own assets or they're not, and the hope would be that they are their own assets that they have modelled themselves and just copy and pasted to save time, which again is perfectly fine. But this final statement just once again shows how shaky this whole disclosure is, and gives prudence to why a lot of people think that it's not fully truthful. So what are my final thoughts on all of this? Well, I wanted to make this video not only to alert people to the fact that this game uses generative AI, because it seems that a lot of people miss that fact, but to also open up a discussion. If this disclosure is true, then the amount of generative AI usage here is incredibly minimal. And I personally do believe in using AI as a tool. That's what AI is there for, to help you out. However, when it comes to the use of generative AI, and especially in the context of a creative thing, such as artwork or writing, that's when it starts to get a bit iffy for me. Because as previously mentioned, all these generative AI models work off of stolen artwork or writing or any creation. And so you using them means you are also making use of this stolen work. I don't think them using it for the grammar is so bad, more so that it's just completely useless. They didn't need to do that. And there were much better tools out there that could have done a much better job than whatever AI they used. Because whatever AI they used didn't do a very good job. And based on the final statement, you would think that they really aren't that supportive of generative AI. However, the use of it, even in such a minimal manner, is still very questionable. And really, this whole situation and the usage they've declared sits on this line between being okay and not being okay. And so that's why I wanted to open this up as a discussion to you guys. Do you think this sort of use of generative AI is okay? Or do you still not support anything that uses generative AI, no matter how much or how little they use? For me personally, I was going to buy the game, but I decided against it, seeing the use of generative AI being there, and also the fact that there's a chance that the disclosure isn't entirely truthful, and more generative AI has been used than what they're saying, in which case I definitely don't want to support it. But yeah, let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this situation. Do you think it's okay and would you buy the game? Or would you avoid it because of even the small amount of generative AI usage? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, maybe leave a like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. A huge shout out to my channel members, I really appreciate you guys, thank you so much for supporting me. And a special thanks to Kobo4231, KimZimMickMix, and MaxTV2587. If you'd like some cool perks such as custom emojis, custom badges, videos early and member only content, and you would like to support me further, then consider becoming a channel member using the join button down below. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see all you wonderful people in the next video. Bye!